Welcome everyone to the Module 1 of Safe System Principles and Assessments. My name is Max McCardle and today moderating is Kathy DeCouris, who we'll go through a bit of a bio later on. But first off, just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are gathered today, the varied lands, and I'd like to pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. And it is varied lands, so we are all across the eastern seaboard, I believe, so hopefully relatively similar time zones, so hopefully no one got out of bed too early to attend this, but welcome everyone. Today's session is going to be facilitated by myself, so Ken Beer is going to be running the other modules, but the first module will be myself. Conducted many safe system assessments and certainly well across safe system principles, which is what we'll be discussing today. So yes, been involved in writing reports and frameworks and other guideline documents for jurisdictions with safe system principles. So feel free to throw any curly questions at me and hopefully I'll be able to answer them. But if I am unable, I will just follow that up with Ken and just take a note of that. So feel free to go nuts on the chat, but hopefully I can answer everything for you. Just to check that has shared my screen there, Kathy?
Certainly has, all good.
Fabulous. So as Kathy mentioned, we have started recording this session, and the reason for that is just in case you do have to step out of today's online session. We acknowledge that, life can get hectic and there's some unforeseen circumstances and things like that. So we do record all our sessions. We strongly encourage that you do attend the whole time just so you can ask questions to your facilitators. However, just acknowledge that it doesn't always work out like that. So we will be posting all our recorded webinars on our learning management system, which Kathy will speak about later on. Also just got a little note there about content warning. So we do discuss some, crashes and crash types. There's not too many graphic images or anything, but just a heads up that if that's triggering for you, or we do try to give you, a little bit of notice that it's coming up. So in today's slides, there's nothing too graphic, but just to make a note for the upcoming modules. Our program moderator, Kathy, would you like to give yourself a bit of a bio?
Thanks, Max. So yes, my name's Kathy DeCouris and I'm the training manager here at Safe System Solutions. So the person in the background usually. So please get in touch if you can't make a session, if you're having any technical issues in the background or anything like that. That's what I'm here for. I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So you feel free to type your questions in as we go, so don't necessarily wait for a pause or a break because it takes time to type them in at that time. So questions or comments, and you can chat with the little three dots next to the chat means you can chat with everyone or you can chat with hosts and panelists. So if there's something happy for everyone to see, and it's usually good to keep the chat engaged with everyone so everyone else can see it. So we can't see you on the screen. You've probably noticed that you haven't got your webcam on, and you also don't have your microphone on. But if you would like to speak, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you, and then you can ask your question verbally as well if you'd like to. Usually if you're having any tech issues, the best thing to do is shut it down and rejoin. That's IT Tech 101 there. And then just keep in touch with me on the side there. So I think that's probably it from me, Max.
Fabulous. Yes, so as Kathy mentioned, details are down here. Any admin issues, trouble logging in, or just questions or anything like that, feel free to get in touch with Kathy. And you discussed the raising the hand. Yep. Chat also to the learning management system, Kathy.
Terrific, thank you. So excuse me, we have, many of you have already jumped into our learning management system. So that's where you will find a copy of the recording after each session. We usually load it a couple of hours after the live session. It's where you'll have all your resources, so a copy of the presentation slides, any guidance documents. It's where you'll jump in and do a very short quiz at the end of each webinar. So there's usually a 10-question multiple choice quiz, just to make sure you're here with us and you're learning everything along the way. And there's a couple of short assignments as well to do. So basically everything is housed in there. You would have received your login details. If you have any trouble accessing that, or you haven't gotten onto that or anything like that, please do send me an email and I'll arrange that for you. You do need access to it in order to actually finish the course. So please make sure you get in touch if you're having any trouble getting access to it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kathy. And would you like to chat about Ken, or?
Yeah, look, Ken's the Ken Beer, which many of you probably know or have come across. He's the principal engineer here at Safe System Solutions, and he delivers quite a bit of our training. And he will be with us for the rest of the sessions with that fabulous moustache still present. And Max, you're delivering session 1 today.
That's correct. So down in the bottom left-hand screen, this is a little QR code to Ken's LinkedIn. He loves to continue the road safety messaging and, you know, any kind of connections in the future that you might require. Loves getting that message out there. I don't know how he produced that QR code, but you're also welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn if you've got any questions. That's a bit too fancy and technical for my skill set, but there you go. Just a bit of background about me. Yeah, I've been working within the safe system space for many years now, and spent a couple of years overseas as well in the UK, where they've adopted a similar, or they've adopted the same philosophy as well. So kind of worked in multiple jurisdictions in that sense, just different sides of the globe. Strong kind of background in construction and actual delivery of road safety projects, so roundabouts and race safety platforms, shared paths, lots of cycling infrastructure. Very much involved in the active transport space, and so heavily involved in those types of things, but also just regularly conducting road safety audits and safe system assessments across Australia. So yeah, doing lots and lots of transport safety work, and certainly heavily involved within this space here of safe system assessment. So feel free to take down my details. I probably won't be the key point of contact for the remainder of the modules, but at the same time, I've no issues getting in touch with me. If I didn't explain anything clearly in today's modules and you want to clarify anything, then feel free just to send me an email there or give me a buzz. Now, we do want to make sure that everyone stays engaged in our webinars, because it is incredibly easy to let this webinar run kind of in the background and then get stuck into your own projects, you know, designing a roundabout or producing a cost estimate or BCRs or anything like that. So in order to get maximum engagement, we've dropped this little fellow at random locations in the presentation. So this is Wally the Wombat warning sign, and he will be hidden throughout today's module. One of the questions that you will get within our quiz, the LMS quiz, will be, how many Wallies did you spot? So it's just a way to make sure that we're, you know, maintaining your level of concentration on this particular presentation and, you know, not trying to get involved in too many other activities. So look out for Wally. This one is not included in the count, so your tally should be 0, but yes, keep a lookout for Wally. Now, we do try to maximize our engagement in another way, which is to give out prizes. If you've ever attended face-to-face training with Ken, you know that he always keeps a suitcase of random knickknacks. You know, his personal suitcase for all his clothes is about this big, and then this big for all the prizes that he needs to give out. And you can see Kathy there behind her has got lots of little interesting bits and pieces going on there. So we do like to hand out lots of prizes. You're a chance to win a prize if you ask any great questions through the chat function. We will periodically also throw out some questions as part of these modules. And if you answer the questions, promptly, or you answer them, very eloquently, we may be handing out prizes for that. We'll also have an opportunity to ask for volunteers to present assignments or your case study. And the final thing that we do is, if you arrive a couple minutes before the start of our next sessions, we actually run some general trivia. It's general trivia, isn't it? Not just road safety.
Look, sometimes it's just Kathy trivia. So,
how many kids does Kathy have, kind of thing?
It's random. It's
Okay.
whatever takes my fancy,
Very
Max.
good.
But yeah, look, it's warm-up trivia. So just just to make sure everyone gets to the session on time and we're ready to go on time, we have a bit of warm-up trivia before the next session.
Fabulous. We do like to see, lots of chatter in the online forum as well. So please, get involved on the LMS, introduce yourself, and also feel free to jot down any points in the chat. If you've got if we mention any sites and you can think of a similar site that you've worked on, another project you've worked on, share those insights. It's really useful for us as presenters and also for the cohort joining today, because, we can take learnings from things that you may have picked up along the way. Now, we do, as part of our course, set competency benchmarks. In other words, we set a bar quite high in order to achieve your certificate of completion of this course. So we need to see that you've attended a minimum of 4 out of 5 webinars live. So as I said, we do provide them as a recording, but we do strongly encourage the live webinars. If you're unable, it seems like you're unable to meet that criteria, just please get in touch with Kathy early on and we can chat about how we can work around that. As I said, the reason we encourage that live format is just so we can get some questions and answers out of you and ensure that that understanding is fully being conveyed. We require satisfactory completion of all our tasks and assignments. So that's things like quizzes, assessments, and also there's a little report that you'll do at the end. And the completion actually requires an 80% pass mark. So it is fairly high. It's certainly not like university days where 50 was good enough. We deliberately set this high because we want to ensure that participants that come through this particular training course are able to demonstrate that they have picked up, learning specifically relating to the safe system principles, safe system assessments. So we've set it high in order to, give us confidence that this course has been able to meet that capability. And, participants have also walked away with an increased knowledge within this space. There's a few little caveats there though. So you do get 3 attempts with those quizzes and assignments. We strongly recommend after the first attempt, if you were unable to meet the 80% and there was something that you didn't understand, we will give you feedback on the assessment. If there's something that you didn't understand about that feedback, or it wasn't clear why it wasn't, given higher mark, that's when we do offer one-on-one coaching. So as Ken likes to say, if we are, getting multiple submissions and it is below the 80% mark and we're failing participants, it's also a failure on us as presenters and teachers. So, we are strongly encouraged and incentivized to let everyone pass. So please just get in touch. That's where you can call me if you'd like, or probably call Ken as well to go through any specific questions.
Thank you, Max. And I'll just jump in there because this is a hybrid group. We've got the group who are doing the full safe system assessment program, which is the 5 webinars and the site visit and the safe system assessment report. And then we do have a special intro group who are doing the first 3 modules only. So that is today's webinar, Thursday and next Tuesday, and they have a mini little task to do. You know, basically just getting warmed up. And so then if you decide you want to come back later to complete the full safe system assessment part of it, then you just have to do the last 2 webinars, but we can talk about that later. But yes, basically, for those of you who are just doing the 3 webinars, it's just the first 3.
Good pickup. Yes, perhaps we need to shift around this slide to make that.
This one's a hybrid one. We haven't
okay.
done it like this before.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, let's get into it. I think, Max, we've always run out of time during the first session, so
that's all good. You can continue to be my time clock and make sure that I'm not missing anything. Anyway, we will get stuck into it. So before chatting about safe system principles, we like to just introduce this topic of different assessment methodologies within road transport projects. So probably the most common and embedded within our realm is the road safety audit. It's been around for decades. It's kind of widely understood. It's a means of identifying risks and, you know, road safety risks, and also assigning a level of risk associated with that. Some jurisdictions then go one step further and say what recommendations can be provided to mitigate that risk. But New South Wales, for instance, they do not provide the recommendations, but that's probably just one component that is regularly looked at as part of road transport projects. A design review kind of fits within the road safety audit, but there is a large portion that is, you know, its complete own assessment methodology. And that's more to do with providing an independent check of things like assumptions within the designers have assumed, and checking their calculations. So it's much more, you know, methodical, checking the relevant standards and supplements to those standards were adhered to, and if any departures that they have been noted and adequately catered for. So that's design review. So there is an overlap between the road safety audit and design review, but they are 2 separate things. Safe system assessment, for those who will be conducting the full 5 modules, you'll get stuck into this topic at all. So you can see there is overlap with both of those topics, but there is really a large portion that neither of those topics cover. So that's why safe system assessments are their own, you know, methodology. They're their own, they have their own framework, their own reporting structure, and their own specific outputs. Because there is quite a large portion which a road safety audit or a design review would not cover. And that will become clearer as we, you know, define exactly what a safe system assessment is. Some of you also may have heard of this safety in design aspect of a project. So that's coming to the point of, okay, this transport project is ready to be constructed. How will it actually be commissioned, and how will it be actually maintained? So they're safe spaces for maintenance vehicles to pull over to access, you know, the variety of infrastructure on the roadside and safely, you know, be able to conduct works on them. That's the safety and design aspect of it. The final one that we have as part of this strange looking Venn diagram is a DDA audit, so Disability Discrimination Act. This is, once again, its complete own separate entity, and it's solely focused on ensuring that the design adequately caters for people with disabilities, people in wheelchairs, visual impairments, mobility impairments, etc. Basically, what we want to get out of this slide is they are their own separate entities. One doesn't necessarily negate the other. One isn't necessarily more important or lead to other, you know, one can't be leveraged over the other. We're just trying to highlight that each of these, while there is overlap with them, they all do have their own aspects that are outside of each other and, have their own specific uses. But today we will really be focusing on safe system principles. So we'll look at road safety and the safe system. By the end of this module, we will be looking to clearly articulate, well, what are the principles of our safe system? Some people use the term elements, some people use the term pillars of the safe system. So we'll clarify exactly what those are. We'll determine the kinetic energy threshold. Some people love this physics term. For those that haven't done physics, it's just a fancy way of saying how much energy is there in a crash, but kinetic energy thresholds for key crash types. We'll explain the differences between previously how road safety has looked at things like crashes and just generally managing the network, and how that exact same crash and network is looked at within a safe system approach or a safe system lens. We'll look at some best practice approaches to behavioural change, as well as some vehicle safety interventions. And we'll also really get critical on how important speed is in the safe system approach. And it's often defined as the silver bullet within road safety, as it's just got an amazing impact on the level of trauma that is expected to occur. And I will be kind and I will mention this is Wally number 1. So that's the only hint I'm going to give you, but that is the first Wally that we've come across. But it's up to you from here on. All right. So plenty of jurisdictions have over the years created road safety plans, road safety strategies, and mentioned the safe system philosophy. Might actually give out a prize here, Kathy, for the first person who can answer this one. The question I've got is, when do you think Australia at a federal or national level adopted the safe system philosophy?
Good one. So just type your answer into the chat.
And when was the safe system philosophy adopted at a national level?
In Australia.
In Australia.
This millennium. Love it, Monica. You're getting a prize for that answer.
We're also happy with joke answers. That's great. It keeps us entertained.
Preference. 2004. We've got the correct answers come in. It was 2004, and it's gone to David Fulton. 2004. Is that right, Max?
That's what I've got in my notes. Yes, that's what I believe. When
almost 20 years ago.
That's correct. Yeah, the Australian Transport Council adopted it in 2004. So people think of the safe system as being a relatively new concept in Australia, but yeah, as Kathy said, it's been nearly 20 years, but it took a few years after that for state jurisdictions to release their own guidance, and then that eventually got that filtered down into local government areas, and that's kind of why perhaps it's taken a little bit longer to get fully entrenched into our psyche, but it has been around for quite a while. Lots of different strategies, as you can see there. Most jurisdictions will have their own road safety strategy or means to reduce trauma, and safe system is certainly embedded within all of those documents. So you'd expect to see things like that. Some actual jurisdictions mention a safe system assessment. So just produced this slide here, which Ken actually recently shared on LinkedIn as well, I saw, which was quite good timing. So for those that do already follow Ken, this may look, Safe System Solutions, this may look familiar. But this is basically stipulating when a safe system assessment is required in a variety of jurisdictions. So there's not one consensus exactly, applied consistently across our states, which is a common story. We tend to do things differently depending on which side of the border you live on. Queensland in particular, I might just focus on the eastern states, considering that that's our general cohort, but SSAs are required on all TMR infrastructure projects as part of their road safety policy. So they are certainly one of the forebearers or one of the leaders within this space. They've set the bar high. They're going to do it on all infrastructure projects, which I'm interested in, because if that includes, you know, changing over a side entry pit, or I don't know, just minor tweaks to a pram ramp, would that require an SSA? Well, if it's part of their policy, you would think so. But yeah, anyway, interesting to see how that plays out in practice. So that's a relatively new kind of policy that they've set. So we'll see how that works out in the real world. New South Wales, lots of people joining from lovely New South Wales. SSA is required at feasibility, functional design and detailed design stages of all infrastructure projects as well. So as Ken will discuss for those who are staying on in the within this course, kind of the most key stage is this feasibility stage, where you've really got an ability to impact on how the design and configuration of your particular project can look. That's when you've got the most ability to be able to transform projects from either, you know, being quite well aligned to safe system principles to being incredibly, you know, highly aligned vision zero projects. So certainly try to get involved at that early stage of the design. ACT requiring SSAs on some major projects, so it's pretty vague. Victoria, we've actually set guidelines depending on how expensive or the cost of the project. So if it's above a $5 million transport project, it's mandatory to get an SSA done, and it's desirable between 2 and 5 million. Less than 2 million, it's described as optional, but there's always this caveat to say you still need to consider exactly how safe system principles are catered for within your specific project. So it doesn't necessarily need to be through an SSA, but you need to document that somehow. Tassie, requiring SSA on some major projects. Generally, Tassie tends to follow a lot of Victorian guidance as well. So you would expect to see similar compliance rates to what our guidelines say here in Vic. Anyway, just thought I'd share that slide. We'll get stuck into the safe system philosophy now. So this slide on the left-hand side, so this diagram on the left-hand side, this is the original safe system philosophy, or the way that it was portrayed in that 2004 federal government. You know, that's what was initially adopted as the safe system. Not expecting you to read this on the right-hand side, but this is kind of how things are looking within a variety of jurisdictions. So that's kind of how it's transformed over the years. But I just want to focus on the left-hand side for now. You can see right in the middle of this figure is the human tolerance to physical force. Now, another technical jargon way to refer to that is biomechanical forces. Once again, it's just a fancier way of saying how much force the human body can withstand before we cannot withstand it, before we will likely be killed or seriously injured. So there are thresholds, and we'll talk more about those thresholds coming up, but that's all about exactly how much force our human bodies are designed to be able to withstand. So that was seen as kind of the central part of this diagram. So that we need to consider exactly how much force the human body can take before we break. That was central. Then key elements around it, elements or pillars, I'll let you choose which term you prefer to use, were defined around this initial idea, which is, well, within the road environment, we can look at our speeds, we can look at our roads and roadsides, and we can look at our vehicles. Those three were identified early on as being critical in addressing road trauma, and in order to, you know, get to a state where we're trying to achieve zero road trauma on our road network, then speeds, vehicles, safer roads and roadsides are all going to be imperative. So these are kind of the leverages or the levers that we have to pull to be able to influence the level of trauma that is occurring on our network. So that's how things actually got started back in 2004. And then someone came along and said, well, hang on, we've also got to think about the occupant or the driver, because a person's behavior will also influence a crash outcome. So for instance, if a person is driving excessive speeds or they're under the influence, that will impact the expected trauma within that specific area of the network. So outside this little circle that we just defined there, this little caveat or note was added: alert and compliant road users. Looking back on this now, this little note has been considered a little bit of a failure within the safe system world, because it's basically a get out of jail card. It's so easy and so common to shift blame on road users. So having this here is basically saying, well, regardless of the safer speed, the road, the roadside, safer vehicles, if a driver wasn't paying attention, wasn't completely sober, wasn't, distracted or fatigued or anything like that, if it was anything to do with the road user, it must be a behavioral thing. So it's their fault and let's just move on. We couldn't have treated that crash. So it was seen as a little bit of a failure, and we've moved away from that. We've pushed it instead as part of this system, a safe system. We've moved that road user behavior within within these pillars itself. So it's part of the system as opposed to being a final afterthought. Because as part of the safe system, what we actually want to see is, even if you were driving, perhaps above the speed limit, or you were fatigued or, distracted or whatever reason, we would like to see the other elements of the safe system to kick into gear to protect you from serious injury or death. So it's no longer just, well, it's their fault and they should have been more attentive. It's no, as a system, we should have protected you.
A real shift in thinking, Max, and I'm sure it will challenge some people in the course and other people who will be on board. But it's interesting that there's a system designed, and then, oh yeah, that's right, there's people that use that system, so we should probably make it for them. I think you're about to go into this, but we've had a question about the definition of human tolerance to physical forces. Obviously, all humans are not the same, and I think you're about to cover this shortly, so we might.
Yes, yep. we do cover that in the next few slides, so that's excellent foreshadowing. But I might just pop that one on the shelf for now.
Right.
And I will carry on. So the safe system, this is the one that we've decided to use here. It looks something like this. So we've got our 4 kind of pillars on the outside: safer speeds, safer road users. So you can see they are part of the system, not just out on the exterior and something that we can blame. Safer roads, also safer roadsides, safer vehicles. We'll talk about each of those pillars throughout the day, so you'll certainly come across those terms frequently. But central to this particular figure, once again, we've got an acknowledgement that human bodies are vulnerable. So that's back to that idea of there's only so much force we can withstand. We are vulnerable. Another really good one that upset people at the time and will probably still ruffle some feathers is acknowledging that people do make mistakes. We make mistakes all the time. You've probably made a mistake today. It's just not likely to have caused anyone any injury. So that is part of what the human race does. We're fallible is another word for it. We regularly make mistakes. The safe system is all about that mistake that you make on the road network should not cost your life or the life of others, and should not seriously injure you or seriously injure others. So it's taking that as a key principle of the safe system. So, and just as an example, I recently, earlier on this year, I conducted a fatal site investigation where a truck had gone through a red light and crashed into a vehicle that was coming out of the side street, and obviously a fatal incident there. The truck driver, was traveling at the speed, wasn't under the influence, tested 0 for drugs, 0 for alcohol, wasn't talking on his phone, but it was hands-free, so it was illegal, but just completely missed the red lights. And because of that particular intervention at that particular intersection, it resulted in a fatal incident. And last week, that truck driver was actually, he was charged previously, but he actually faced court. And he's spending 2.5 years now in prison for, what was a mistake and something that he said he'll regret, and, just a simple lapse in judgment, and has resulted in that. And it's such a difficult thing because it is a mistake that's caused a fatal outcome, which is obviously tragic, but it's tragic in the sense that this person who obviously didn't intend for this to occur and has just made that, split-second decision or indecision and hasn't stopped where there was a red light, and it's resulted in him being unable to, enjoy all the freedoms of society. So yeah, I'm sure I'd probably have a different opinion if this was a loved one of mine, but it just seems tragic from both lenses. There's no real winners in those cases, but I digress. The final principle within this space is a shared responsibility. And this one actually puts the onus back on everyone within this webinar, because we as road network managers or people that's, are working on projects within the road network, we have a responsibility to look after our community. So we need to make sure that when we are designing road transport projects, that we have considered safe system principles, and we're doing all that we can to ensure that things like speeds, road users, roads, vehicles, all those kind of elements have been considered as part of our projects, and that we are trying to get towards a scenario where the likelihood of death and serious injury within that specific corner that you're looking after is close to 0. Another slide here just to highlight some key principles. Everyone has different versions of this, so don't get too stressed if you've seen other examples of this diagrams, but part of the safe system, no death or serious injury. That one is pretty consistent. Some jurisdictions have actually set a target when they want to see that. Transport for New South Wales, I believe it's 2056. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Victoria, we're 2050. So we've set targets to say that we don't want to see any more trauma on our road network by a specific date. And the safe system is all about achieving that. So certainly one of the key principles. People make mistakes, already touched on that one. We've got a shared responsibility and people are vulnerable. So it's similar to those inner circle ones that we showed on the previous slide there, but often to comprehend the safe system framework or this philosophy is, let's just take a look at a different work environment, because within the transport realm, we're perhaps biased with our own views, considering we probably use the network every single day, and we're certainly involved within transport projects. So we'll talk about a safety culture within a different industry. And the industry we'll look at is manufacturing, and I'm going to say manufacturing cans, aluminium cans. So there's this variety of steps that can be looked at, which are kind of seen as the ways that you can look at safety within, a specific industry. So the first one is referred to as pathological. So within this example here, these children operating machinery and, no PPE, no gloves, no shoes in that instance. This pathological mindset is the idea that it's up to you to protect yourself. And that's basically how manufacturing used to work. It's basically, this is a dangerous place. You've really got to be switched on because there's lots of things here that could harm you. So it completely puts the onus on that specific person to look after their safety. That's referred to as pathological. The next step up is called a reactive type of philosophy. And this is basically saying, okay, well, we've noticed that machine in the corner there, it's regularly chomping on people's arms and it's regularly causing harm to our workers. So, you know what? We should probably, put a guard on that, or maybe like fence off that area so everyone is aware of how dangerous that machine is. Put a few signs up or something like that. So that's reactive. So that's waiting for trauma to occur and then implementing some kind of treatment to hopefully mitigate that risk. These ones should perhaps be ringing bells with some people here. The next step up there is when we get our economists on board and they start to get some calculations going. So a BCR, benefit cost ratio, which I'm sure many of us are aware of. But it'd be basically like saying, so we'll go back to that machine, which has been injuring people. And all right, we know when it injures people, it's taken off. It needs to be decommissioned for a week and, fully inspected. And we also need to pay the hospital bills of the person that was injured. We need to pay out their family, grievances or whatever, if it was fatal. So we look at all of those costs and we say, all right, well, that's really costing me £30,000 a year, and it's pounds back in these days, not dollars. So that's costing me £30,000 a year for that machine. But if I invest £10,000, then I can really mitigate that as a risk. So as a benefit cost ratio, that's 10 to 30, so 1 to 3. It makes a lot of sense for me to actually invest in infrastructure in this case, or a treatment to reduce that risk. So that's a BCR. That should also sound very, very familiar. Next step up is a proactive safety environment. So this is where we say, okay, we can only produce this many cans safely per week. Anything above that, we can't do it. It just, we don't have enough resources, or there's not enough space. The machines aren't meant to work for that long period of time, etc. This is what we set as, this is the condition. We're allowed to work up to that condition and nothing more. So that's saying safety is, in fact, that is where we draw the line, as opposed to production is more important. The final one is all about maintenance, which is basically just keeping this level of proactive, that proactive scenario maintained at that level. And it involves things like, inspection regimes, ensuring that what was set out in those requirements are actually being met, etc. But obviously, we've used this example here of manufacturing cans. We can definitely apply that to our transport network. So this is kind of how the SAFE system fits within this. So you may have noticed that there's already mobility mentioned there and mobility mentioned there. So we can have a think about how this relates to transport. But the question which we're often asked is, well, where does road transport fit? Which one of these safety culture philosophies? And the answer really is it kind of fits across them, because The pathological, the idea that it's up to everyone for themselves. Well, when our youth turn 18, they pass a driving test and we give them access to the entire road network. And we say, yep, you can go out and buy a car. Just, be really careful out there because it's super dangerous, and good luck. So that's a little bit of a pathological response. We acknowledge that, yeah, it is super dangerous. It's really risky out there, but all the best. This reactive philosophy within the transport space, that is just the black spot program, or well, previously how the black spot program run, which is we wait for a cluster of fatal or serious injuries, and then we pump in some money there to address that cluster. I will just add a caveat there that the black spot program is now moving towards a proactive space as well. So you can provide a safe system assessment or a road safety audit. So even if there hasn't been any crashes there, you can say, I've got a report here which says this is a risky environment. Let's not wait for the crashes to occur. Let's spend some money to improve the safety here. But certainly black spot programs previously has been a very reactive program. This calculating one, BCRs, I mean, it's part and parcel of every project that we do within the transport space, but assigning a cost on human life, how many predicted human lives are expected to be saved as part of a project, and whether or not it's worth investing in that project. So obviously like to see BCRs greater than 1, which assumes that for every dollar that you've invested, you're going to save more than $1. Proactive, we've got lots of proactive examples coming up, but yeah, looking at other risk rating methodologies, things like infrastructure risk rating, things like ANRAM, OSRAP, IRAP, KiwiRAP, looking at ways that we can identify risk across the road network, and then, applying interventions at those high risk locations. So once again, not waiting for any trauma to occur, but acknowledging that trauma in itself can be a little bit random in nature. So it's not necessarily to say that if there's 3 crashes that have occurred on a road that's 200 kilometers, that's the most dangerous road that there is. There's a degree of randomness with these things. So being proactive in that sense and not waiting is certainly a great way. But another example within the proactive space that Ken loves to share, it's this idea of school speed zones. Ken actually did a bit of a study on this back when he was planning manager within the Department of Transport, or Vic Roads here. Basically, if you look at across the state network or across the jurisdiction, macro sense, the BCR for a school speed zone program is appalling. It doesn't add up. Because if you consider, you might think, oh, well, school speed zone is just a couple signs. And if you're in New South Wales, you've got 2 sets of flashing lights. So it's not necessarily a big expense in terms of the infrastructure. But you also need to take into account the productivity. So if you are slowing down traffic between peak periods of time, and although it may be for one vehicle, it may be only, 10, 20 seconds additional time for their journey. If you then multiply that by all of those vehicles that pass through there, 5 days a week, 40 weeks a year for 15 years, or for however long the treatment is expected to last, and you do that across the state or at a very macro level, those costs are huge. The productivity rate for Australia is about $88 per hour. So quite high. So whenever you've got these reductions in, moving traffic, and that's what economists, these are the figures that they deal in. They put a cost for all these things. They put a cost for a child's life. The Bureau of Statistics, you can get that on. You can get that on Canberra's website and have a look exactly what that is worth. But if it yeah, in this specific example, the school's speed zone program does not actually produce a high enough BCR to warrant investment. It's below 1. And when you think of it like that, it is just grotesque. It just sounds awful that you could possibly even consider putting a dollar figure against a child's life. But that is the world that we live in. And despite all that setback, that kind of sentimentality and the understanding of driving slow around school zones is somewhat understood. And so the ability to be able to push out those treatments, across jurisdictions has been widely accepted. So despite not meeting that BCR, it's still seen as a proactive treatment because it's not waiting for trauma to occur. It's getting in there. Anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent as well. But I might pause here, Kathy, and we might hop into a quiz just to get everyone on their toes. So are you able to load up today's poll?
Yeah, absolutely. You're keeping me on my toes too. Thank you, Max. Okay, so a poll should have appeared up on your screen there, and there's 2 questions. So which of the following is not a key principle of the SAFE system? So you're not being marked on this or anything like that. It's just checking to see that you're here and you're engaging and that sort of thing. Which of the following is not a key principle of the SAFE system? So is it aim for no death or serious injury, aim for no mistakes on the road, people are vulnerable, people make mistakes, shared responsibility? And then the next question is, we haven't quite covered it, but it's going to lead into our human tolerance business. At what speed did Usain Bolt cross the finish line in his world record 100-meter sprint? At what speed? So again, you're not being marked on any of these. Just jump in there and answer those. Now, we've had some questions, Max, and I'm also going to alert you to the time. We need to make sure we finish on time. But some quick answers here. So will autonomous vehicles fix it?
We do chat about autonomous vehicles later on today, but It's a very valid question. Some people side in the camp that, yep, that will do the job. The only issue is it's so far away, not just like getting autonomous vehicles on our network, but then also within our fleet. It takes about 25 years for the newest vehicles to then get rolled out into the majority of the network. So it just, there's still so much safe system planning and safety work to be done before we get to that stage that, we're certainly not at a risk of,
we're not going to wait for autonomous vehicles. Sorry, the challenge with proactive, so this is a comment, challenge with proactive black spot submissions is when competing for funds against reactive almost always takes priority.
Yep, that's pretty valid. If I was in the federal government seat and I was weighing up these 2 different projects, there's similar, project costs and things like that. One of them had 3 crashes, the other one was supported by a road safety audit. I'd probably go for the one with the crashes, but in saying that, there's also a big push to get black spot projects in regional areas because Metro seem to be much more willing to submit applications. So if you're in a regional centre and you didn't have the crashes, but you were going for proactive, I would certainly recommend you get RSAs completed and get those submitted end of October.
Okay, thank you. Has the change to accident reporting requirements to the police changed the crash reporting and projects selected? I'm thinking we might need some more information on that one.
Yeah, I might ask just for a bit of clarification on that one.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. Actually, we do have our police person on the line who said yes. Wal's answered that question. Thank you for that, Wal. And yeah. Okay, I think we're good for now. I will end that poll and just share those results for everyone. So look, I think great result. Which of the following is not a key principle? Aim for no mistakes on the road. That is not one of them, because we know people will make mistakes. It's what people do. Sometimes we have good days, sometimes we have bad days. And split on this one. What speed did Usain Bolt cross the finish line in his world record 100-meter sprint? 34 kilometers or 44 kilometers were the most popular answers. What was it, Max?
I was going to ask you.
Oh.
I think it was 44.
It was 44. Yes, that's right. And yeah, very good. It's a tricky one to work out, though.
There is a reason for that Usain Bolt question, which I might hop into now. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing those. Here we go. So this graph here is regularly presented in road safety papers and safe system reports and things like that. Along the x-axis, we have our collision speed. So that is, as the name suggests, the speed at which that collision occurs. It's not the posted speed limit. It's the speed that the collision occurs. And along our y-axis, our fatality probability of death, in other words. So in that Usain Bolt question, which I think we've got the fellow here, here we go. He was running at about 44 kilometers per hour. And if you were to park a vehicle at the end of his running lane, or if there was a fixed object like a brick wall or a tree, and he ran straight into that, this graph would tell us there's a 60% chance he wouldn't make that. And it doesn't really acknowledge that Usain Bolt is probably much more well-equipped to survive that type of impact. But this fatality probability, which, referring back to a previous comment, it takes into account a complete, or the whole range of society. So it takes into account a child to an elderly person who are obviously much more vulnerable to an athlete such as this Hulk of the human, Usain Bolt. Anyway, that's just to demonstrate how that particular crash type, how that crash may have occurred for Usain Bolt. And there's actually a really interesting study that has occurred, which is to suggest that the human body is basically designed to withstand crash forces for how fast we can run. Because back in the day, that was basically the level of trauma that was expected, unless we fell off a cliff, I guess. But generally, the exercise was you should be able to run as fast as you can and hit a solid object, and it will hurt, but you probably won't die. That's generally what our bodies are sustained to do. Now we can get in vehicles and obviously travel much faster than that. So that's kind of why the physical, biomechanical forces of our body are just not able to withstand higher impacts. And this is where Ken likes to make the joke of, well, the next exercise we'll go run out inside and we're going to run out as fast as we can into a tree, and we'll see who survives. But no, we won't be able to do that. The important thing to note within this particular graph, so this one is regarding a vehicle colliding with a pedestrian that's also considered a cyclist or a motorcyclist, and understand that cyclists and motorcyclists, they may have added protection, but this graph is kind of applied for all three vulnerable road users there. What we actually look at is, we can see kind of at this point here, the 30-kilometer mark, things start to get extremely bad extremely quickly. So that's when things really start to ramp up. So that's the speed that we often refer to as the safe system thresholds, or the kinetic energy thresholds. The way to remember it is, if there's a vulnerable road user collision that you're worried about, the speed that we want to ideally have those conflicts at is at 30 kilometers per hour or below. It's quite low. So 30 kilometers per hour if it's a collision with a pedestrian, a cyclist, or a motorcyclist. And you'll see that there are these values kind of right up here. So at a collision speed of 60 kilometers per hour, 95% of the time you would expect that to be a fatality, but there is a 5% chance that someone just happens to, survive that. Similarly, at a collision speed of about, 20 kilometers per hour, I don't know, 96% of the time you would expect that to be survivable, but 4% of the time it would not be, and that would be the more vulnerable. So children and people with disabilities or other impairments and etc. So I should also confirm, and it looks like that's just come up in the chat as well, but if these speeds that we reference here is, think of it like the closing speed. Actually, I'll pause it there. It'll make more sense when we look at other crash types, how to actually calculate that speed. But that would be the speed of the vehicle. So 30 kilometers per hour, the speed of the vehicle. Got a little video here. Hopefully this plays. But this is a fellow here who is a gymnast, and he's about to run into the, I don't know what that thing is called. Is that the pummel horse? Pummel horse? Anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
So he runs into that, and yep, probably a couple of cracked ribs there, but not really going to die from that, and that's running full pelt, and came back a couple of years later and won gold in the Olympics. So his life wasn't too gravely affected by that, but that's the kind of level of trauma that we as humans are able to survive. The next slide I've got here is we look at another crash type, which is our intersection crash type. And this is, sometimes called intersection crashes, T-bone crashes, or 90-degree. This vehicle here doing the damage, that's referred to as the bullet vehicle. And unfortunately, this vehicle is called the target vehicle, which sounds a bit morbid, but that's just a terminology used. So the bullet vehicle, in this case, similarly, we can see things start to kick up at about this point here, which is our 50 kilometer per hour mark. So whenever there's the possibility for T-intersection crashes, ideally in a safe system world, we would like to see speeds managed to 50 kilometers per hour or below to ensure that fatalities are seen as, quite a rare event. Final crash type we will have a look at is a head-on. And this is when we are looking at vehicles traveling in opposing directions, and we're actually looking at the speeds of both of those vehicles. So they're assumed to be traveling both at the same speed, okay? This is the point here that we are looking at. So you can see it's similar all the way along around that point, and that's the 70 kilometer per hour mark. So for head-on crashes, we look at the 70 kilometer per hour range there. We've also included this little pop out here, but feel free to click on that if you would like more information on this topic. They're kind of dotted throughout the presentations. Just a useful resource if you ever need to refer back to these graphs and can't quite work out what's happening. But 70 kilometers per hour for our head-on collisions.
Thank you, Max. Is that assuming the same vehicle type? So if we're talking about a heavy vehicle,
that would be assuming the same vehicle type as well. Yeah, good question. Let's give a prize out to that question. Actually, that's a really good question.
All right, there you go, Richard. You get a prize. And there is a Mythbusters short clip on this very thing in the learning management system.
Thank you. And that will be, that's going to be available online. So feel free to watch that over lunch today. There is this additional guidance sheet that is provided within an Austroads document that is also goes hand in hand with that previous slide and those graphs that we looked at. Basically on the left-hand side here, got a variety of different crash types. And then on the y-axis, crash speeds. These numbers relate to the safe system assessment for those staying on for the full 5 days, but it's basically, the likelihood of fatality occurring, with 4 being it is definitely going to happen. But you can see, for pedestrians versus a heavy vehicle, for instance, at the 30 km/h mark, it's in this red category, which is, it's very likely that it will happen. Just another useful reference, but it makes much more sense if you are actually hopping into the safe system assessments as well. But feel free to use that within this space as well. All right. I might have to get my jets on because I've got a few more slides to get through. This is adapted from a variety of journals, basically. Lots and lots of different jurisdictions use this. Australia has kind of moved away from this, but I'll show you what this is actually talking about. It's basically, if you were to analyze the crashes occurring across the network within, any jurisdiction, more international, as I said, drivers or road users, perhaps that should be referred to as, are seen to be the cause of those crash types, the majority of times. Roadsides, they also play quite a big part in the role of that crash, and vehicles somewhat of a part. Now, if you look at that at face value, what that may suggest to you, or if you're new to the road safety world, is, well, let's pump money into this driver space, because that's clearly, the biggest aspect that we need to be worried about. It's all behavioral. It's all a driver making mistakes or driving too fast or, drink driving, etc. It doesn't really give you the full picture. So for those that have seen this graph, we instead like to think of, translate this into a safe system version, which is, okay, if a crash has occurred, it's a system failure. It's not a driver failure. It's a system failure. So it's the road, the roadside infrastructure, speeds. It's got to do with behavior, and also the vehicles. It's all of those elements coming together that have caused this. So it's not trying to place blame on one single element. There are these little circles that kind of sit outside, which is drivers that are, excessive, driving at 250 km/h on a local road. It's probably not a lot the safe system can do about that without vehicle interventions, which I'll chat to in a second. And the other thing that's kind of taken outside of this circle is driver inexperience, which is, if you've just happened to pass your test but haven't really experienced city driving, you haven't driven rurally, you haven't driven at night, etc., haven't driven enough hours, and then leading to that, well, you haven't really experienced a whole range of different scenarios. Those are much, much smaller, and there's a very, very strong argument that those still belong within the system. So take that with a little bit of grain of salt. There is this idea within the road safety world that there's different types of errors that occur on our network. And I'm just going to quickly cover this stuff, but basically this idea of deliberate violations, that is what is most widely reported within mainstream media or within any topic whatsoever. It only really accounts for about 35%. So deliberate violations is, you are basically creating risk for yourself just for whatever reason. It's only about 35%. So the bulk of trauma fits within this category here, which is, I just made a mistake, I drove when I was tired and I shouldn't have, or I happened to look down at my phone when it went off and I caused the crash, and those types of things. So the majority of trauma is actually people just making mistakes. Just we're fallible. We will make mistakes. So this is the kind of errors that we are predominantly going to be able to treat within the SAFE system, and the ones that we're certainly most interested in. Got a little exercise here, and as part of this exercise, I will also give you all just a 5-minute break so you can have a little stretch. But what we have is on the left-hand side, we have the traditional approach, so how things may have previously would have been viewed. On the right-hand side, we have the SAFE system approach. And what we want you to do is just match the left hand to the right hand, how things transformed. Feel free to just write it down on your pen and paper in front of you or on your computer. Or, there's a poll.
It's pretty high tech here, Max. There is a poll.
There you go.
So yeah, look, and sometimes the traditional approach and the SAFE system approach, there might be, might be more than one correct answer and that sort of thing. Again, you're not being marked on it, just something for you to have a think about. Where have we gone from the traditional approach to where we're going with the SAFE system approach? And we'll give everyone a bit of a break as well now. So take some time to answer these questions. And 4 minutes?
Yeah, we'll come back in 4 minutes. So enjoy a little stretch or get some water, and then we'll hop back into it.
Terrific. Thank you.
So I might just talk about it on the screen. So let's have a look. For our victim blaming, generally it correlated quite well with recognizing that humans make mistakes, human error, minimizing its consequences, shared responsibility. So quite a few people went with that option. Emphasis on road user and compliance, road user education and compliance. Well, instead we're heading more towards creating a forgiving system. As opposed to just looking at focus on crash reduction, focus on the consequences. So not necessarily every single crash, but if it's a severe or a fatal crash, those are the ones that we really want to pick out and target. 4 pillars act independently. Well, we certainly want to see all of those elements of the system. We want to consider them wholly, not just independent. And we've gone from a mobility to safety balance to maximizing safe mobility. And as Kathy touched on, if you had slightly different results, well, it's a little bit open to interpretation, that one. So there is different answers there. So don't get too stressed. Got a quote next from Ian Cameron, who is Western Australian, but I think it really summarizes quite well the SAFE system. So we need a paradigm shift in road safety policy to stop the road death epidemic, and we need it now. It is unrealistic to expect that education and enforcement alone will bring the needed step change. Even road users who know and follow the rules make mistakes. So that comes back to that idea that we're always going to make mistakes. A safe system creates an environment in which simple mistakes will no longer kill people, kill and seriously injure. Really poignant, great words used there by Ian. Well, a little bit of a chat about the Melba Highway. So this is Victoria's first narrow median central barrier system installed. It's installed, I'm going to say 2015, quite a while ago. Anyone in the chat, if you want to jot down any ideas as to why this project may have been difficult to deliver. Is there anything that pops out to you? What kind of challenges do you think the planning and delivery team had with this particular project? And I've got a few little points in my brain, and if you've happened to jot down the same answers, we'll hand out a prize. So what do you think the issues could have been with delivering this median barrier project? So putting this barrier in the middle. So prior, there was just 2 white lines like that, 2 barrier lines. Give you a minute or so to have a think about that.
Good one, Max. And I should probably also tell people that the prizes haven't magically appeared next to you at your computer just now, but we send them out at the end of the course.
Good.
So I keep track, and then you'll get your prize with your certificate at the end of the program. There was a question that came in earlier. So whilst people are still jotting down all the challenges to pop this median in there, should a reckless driver crash, such as the recent 18-year-old crash killing numerous kids, speed and deliberately swerving on a narrow tree-lined road, be excluded from black spot funding, e.g. an accident waiting to happen at some point in the journey?
Okay, that's
a bit to unpack in that one.
Yeah. So in terms of safe system, you would say that should have been treated by the system. So the roadside could have intervened. The vehicle could have intervened and said, no, you're not traveling that fast. No, you're not getting out of your traffic lane. Speeds could have played a part of that as well. If it was a lower speed environment, if there was, infrastructure to support that lower environment and things like that. So in terms of the system, the safe system would treat that as not one road user making a mistake, but let's look at the other pillars. In terms of the black spot and trying to get money out of the federal government, you might have a difficult time trying to argue that if you were trying to include that as part of your BCR calculations, that specific crash. And I think we can laugh about this because the person was okay. I've got another little story if I can digress on this topic. I recently did sorry, Kathy, I can see you looking at your watch, but recently did a black spot application, and there was a serious injury. It was another injury. It was other. So it didn't go to hospital or anything. Anyway, it did require a police report, and I read the police report, and the mum was driving out of a driveway, backing out, and the teenage daughter in the passenger side saw a huntsman in the car. She opened the door and threw herself out, and her mum drove over her. And that was another crash. So I didn't have to go to hospital. But anyway, that crash I certainly could not include within the black spot application because it's a little bit difficult to treat that with infrastructure, those kind of random events. But yeah, anyway, just another little anecdote that I had to share.
All
Let's
right.
get back to the chat, shall we?
Yes, and Lisa's put in a acronym in there that I haven't heard of. OSOM.
Yeah, oversize, overmass vehicles, so really heavy vehicles, really big ones.
Thanks. Okay. All right. Sorry, I'll go back to what are the challenges with putting this in?
Yes, so I might just have a flick through and I'll see if there's any that caught my attention. Maintenance safety, absolute. Motorcyclists, resistance to narrow median, yep, with wire rope safety barrier. Jackie saying that South Gympie Highway in Tooradin was the first one. I believe you're actually correct. This one is often touted as the first one, but South Gympie was the first.
Okay, Jackie, you get a prize.
Well done, Jackie. Yeah, so if you've got heavy vehicles and whether or not they can actually safely turn and they're not going to collide with those things, etc. Maintenance is certainly a big one. I'm looking for one in particular. Located in a cut, difficult construct. Yep. Minimum deflection, distances not met. Nadia there. Thank you very much. That was the one that I was after. So we'll give it a prize out to Nadia. And it's a really interesting discussion that did occur at this site. But basically, if a vehicle were to run out of their traffic lane and veer to the right and collide with the wire rope system, this system is designed to obviously deflect, and it may deflect into the oncoming traffic lane. So there still is a risk of a head-on crash. And people mostly within the standards team or saw, well, we know that particular product deflects 2.5 meters. So if you haven't got 2.5 meters space, then you haven't achieved what that product is trying to do. And there's still that risk there. So it's just unacceptable. really challenging conversation to have, because prior to this intervention, as I said, all there was 2 white lines separating that. So this physical barrier being put there is an enormous improvement. It is going to drastically reduce the risk of head-on crashes. For the deflection to occur and another vehicle to be there traveling close to that traffic lane, and also, you know, not able to veer out and move across or anything like that, it is a risk. And I'm not trying to say that that's, you know, not a risk or not something to consider, but to scrap this project totally because of that, it just seems bananas, because what is currently out there should be surely seen as a significant road safety risk. So that was certainly one that came across. And this is a really good example of where a safe system assessment can be really important to help get these types of projects across the line. If you conduct a road safety audit on this particular project, it would come across and say, you know what, I've had a look at the standards and I know that this product will deflect into that traffic lane. That's a risk. And that's all it will do. It'll say that's a risk. And it'll say, here's something you can do to mitigate it, which would be, you know, make this wider, which wasn't feasible with this particular project. But anyway, so that's a road safety audit. It just highlights the safety risks associated with the proposed design. A safe system assessment instead says, okay, this is your existing condition. These are the risks that I've noted. This is the score. It's a quantitative assessment. So there's a number. This is the score that this particular road environment gets. I'm then going to do another assessment on the proposed design. And yes, there is a risk that the deflection will create a head-on crash, but it's doing such a fantastic job of reducing head-on crashes that this is the score for the proposed design. And it's less than that, which means it's actually providing a better level of safety. So a real example of where safe system assessments are incredibly valuable. Here's another snapshot of this particular site. And sure enough, the wire rope was struck, which is what it was put there for. This was back in May 2016. And the traffic engineer in this particular region, he got a phone call about this crash from the person who was driving this side. So this vehicle crashed into it. This vehicle called up the traffic engineer and just said, hey man, just wanted to let you know, I heard you were responsible for putting the wire rope safety barriers there, and just thought I should let you know, I think you saved my life. Because the other vehicle was inattentive and driving would have been a head-on crash straight into me, going 100 kilometers an hour, and I'm not sure we would have survived that. So the traffic engineer was savvy enough to get the comms team involved, and they actually interviewed that person as well as the driver of this vehicle, and they created a little ad for that, which we've put on the LMS. So feel free to watch that one. It's a great story.
Max, quick question.
Yeah.
Did they consider other barrier types?
Okay, if we were to install this today, we would be putting a back-to-back flexible guardrail solution because they don't deflect quite as much. So something like this. But that was not an approved product when this was installed. So yes, other products were installed, were considered, but only what was currently approved, which was the wire rope.
Okay, and we're also getting it possible to do F-types for less maintenance and heavier vehicles. But there was also a comment earlier from David Johnson about saying we installed this in northern New South Wales in the mid-2000s in a 1.6 metre wide median on the Pacific Highway, has saved many potential head-ons there and has never been an issue with deflection causing problems.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And let's give a prize out to that. That's great to hear.
You're even more prolific with your prizes than Ken is. Okay.
Oh,
right.
really?
Yes.
Oh, that's a prize for you, Kathy. Thank you.
Oh. All right. Keep it moving.
All right. So first pillar we'll have a chat about is our safe road users. And we know things that do work quite well within this space: education, encouragement, enforcement, and a graduated licensing system. So we'll chat through those dot points now, but education is a really big one. And unsurprisingly, it is very important to get stuck into the little humans, or the little ones at a young age, where they're most, able to be molded into specific thinking and, able to absorb a lot of information. But you get started with, these types of campaigns and being safe around the roads and holding hands when you're crossing, etc. You get started at a very young age, and that's generally widely accepted among the community as a pretty sensible thing to be doing. So there's not a whole lot of community backlash with that one there. There are also things to promote safer driving through high schools as well. So not just during the preschool, primary, but also continuing that learning all the way through high school, particularly once these youth are eligible to drive. So once they turn 16, really trying to hone in that message of the importance of road safety is once again seen as a very important thing. One thing that Ken likes to mention in this space here is advanced training courses. So advanced driver training courses, or safety driving courses, as they're sometimes called. Basically, those courses that are run where you bring your vehicle and you drive as fast as you can, and you try and get out of skids, or you hit corners really fast and stuff like that. This is a well-documented and evaluated training or education platform that does not work. So if you've ever considered sending your child, or anyone that out to a driver training program, they do not work. And the reason for that is, yes, you do get some level of new knowledge about how your car works and the abilities and how skidding feels like and things like that. But what you also get is a massive amount of confidence increase, and that in turn results in an ability to raise your risk profile. So basically, you get this much amount of skill, but then you're taking this much amount of risk out there on the network. So it's well studied and documented that actually attending those courses increases your level of risk of road trauma, which is interesting. I like to think of it as like if you were to, I don't know, you want to learn a piece on the saxophone, so you go to a teacher one weekend and you learn a piece, and it's really simple, hot cross buns or something like that, and you can play it that day, no problem. And then 6 weeks later, you go to pick up the saxophone and you won't be able to play it. And you might be confident that, yeah, I'll be able to do it, but you won't be able to. So kind of think of it like that if it helps. We also have this L2P programs, or helping people within the community who may not have access to trainer drivers to be able to support those programs and things like that. So that education space. Really like this advert here. This one is from the TAC in Victoria, but what it's actually communicating as, people generally don't believe in individual risk. But if you push that risk to other people, that's when things start to click. So this is getting into the education space, the psychology space as well. If we were to communicate to this driver, hey mate, don't text and drive, it's dangerous, the driver's going to be like, don't talk to me, I'm not interested. That message does nothing for me. If instead we say, hey mate, if you text and drive, your kids are going to text and drive. That is much more effective at communicating that risk. So similar to this idea is speed zones, where if you yeah, if you've got a, say, 100 km/h road and you were reducing that speed to 80 km/h, and you say to the community, it's to, you know, to reduce the risk of crashes occurring here. Individuals are very, very quick to point out, come on, I've been driving this for ages. Not going to happen to me. That's not my individual risk. I just don't believe it. There's no correlation there. Very, very quick to just dismiss that idea of individual risk. However, we as network managers, we don't look at individual risk. We look at collective risk. So we look at all those specific individuals that travel that route, and all those minute risks added up together actually do sum to become quite, you know, a high risk profile, which is why we advocate for lower speeds, because it's not about that individual, it's about the community. So what works within this space? Well, whole school approach, going through the years, education as well as other activities, support for community engaged education, graduated licensing scheme. So that one is all about when you first get started driving, there's all these regulations as to what you can do, what you can drive, when you can do it, etc. And then as you start to become more confident, those requirements are relaxed. Education targeting particular motivated groups. So motivated groups are parents. They're very, very motivated. They certainly want to look after their children and things like that. So trying to target them and getting the messaging coming from parents to children. And action programs that change the way road users use the road network. Things that do not work. And I already mentioned one of these, but I'll just get them all up. Skill-based driver training, one-off events, driver simulation, and we've put an asterisk on that one. Probably not quite at the stage yet where that is working, but I can certainly imagine once we've got, you know, I could see that being quite a good way of dealing with risk going forward. Membership of participating car racing clubs, go-karting, information-only approaches. And the other one I really wanted to expand on is this fear tactics. So decades ago, kind of taking young kids out to morgues or to hospitals where there's people with road trauma accidents and saying, you know, this is why you got to be careful. Once again, it just falls into that that idea of, well, that's individual risk, and you just think that's not going to happen to me, basically. So it's seen as not an effective way of kind of targeting these education campaigns. Love to show this slide. This one's fantastic. So this one is that graduated licensing system. So learners within the first 2 years of driving, and this is the amount of trauma that is occurring on the y-axis. You can see there's a low risk profile there. It's fairly low down to the ground and not a lot happening. As soon as those users are able to drive by themselves with their P plates, that risk exponentially increases. Eventually, we start to see that risk level going down, and you know, it continues to go down as we become more and more experienced. But if you have a look, we never get back to this level here. We never get back to our learner stage. And if you've ever driven with a learner, they are incredibly alert. You know, they're very focused, very switched on. They're certainly not one to risk take. They're not one to speed, etc. I mean, obviously, depending on which learner you have, but that's why they have such a low risk profile. And even, you know, after driving 8 years by yourself, you're still not at that level that you were with, you know, with a supervised driver. Something interesting I always find in that one. Things that we do know that work are encouragement, so incentivizing campaigns. So for instance, you know, giving out money for people that are driving well, or for giving a free full license for a P-plater that hasn't had any demerit points. Advertising, marketing specific behaviors. So if you say drive safely, people have no idea what that means. If you say every 2 hours, take a break, have a cup of tea, have a rest, that's very specific. and much more likely to garner a response. Comedy is actually really often used in transport ads because it's very effective for recall, and it's all got to do with our culture. This kind of works into that space of, the mistakes, this ad here in South Australia, but other people make mistakes. So it's got nothing to do with you, mate. It's other people. So slow down. There's a little bit of that blame culture still in there, but it's certainly going to the right area of trying not to say you need to slow down. It's saying other people, which I think is quite clever. The TAC have released this unforgettable fellow here called Graham, and Graham is what the human body should look like if he were to survive our road network. So you can see that's a pretty far-fetched version of a human body. That's not really the way that we are physically built, but that is the form that would be required to survive our road network. And the TAC, this is actually housed in the Melbourne Museum. Graham is. Students come through here. It's organised with schools and the TAC, and they have a look at Graham, and then they look at interventions, things like speeds, putting barriers, sealing shoulders, etc., things like that. And once you put in these interventions, Graham starts to shift into a form that is more representative of what humans look like. So trying to get that idea into the next generation that the road network out there is just not built for the human body to withstand. And also to hopefully encourage some, thinking about what should our road network look like for our current body. Enforcement, if you ask the police, they completely understand that it is part of the SAFE system and it's part of creating a road safety network, but it's not the answer. They cannot be everywhere at once. So we need strategic enforcement, specific locations. There's this idea that even having a visual presence is enough to help reduce the risk of, risk-taking behavior or driving under the influence and stuff like that. But yeah, it's certainly not seen as the answer. Speed or road safety cameras, speed cameras, certainly seen as the ire of some of the community. These point-to-point cameras, I'm sure everyone is aware of them, but basically it takes a snapshot of where you are at that particular point in time, and then 5 kilometers down the motorway, it takes another snap of your number plate and calculates how long you've traveled how long in time it's taking you to travel between those 2 points, and able to calculate your average speed. And if it's above the speed limit, then you'll be getting a fine. Thought I might share, in Sweden, they implemented one of these point-to-point camera systems, but what they did was they, so obviously they've got all the details of all the number plates that have passed through there, and anyone that was noted as traveling above the speed limit were given a fine. However, the fines were pulled together, and every month a lottery was drawn, and every vehicle that passed through there not speeding, they got a lottery ticket. So you could win that month's fines of the population. So rather than it being, revenue raising for the state government or for the police, it was given back to members of the community who were adhering to the speed limit, which is, quite a novel way of doing things. These kind of devices. Oh, sorry, Kathy.
Oh no, that's okay. There's just so much terrific chatter going on in the chat, and I did also want to warn you, we do have a police person online, so careful what you say there.
Oh.
No, I think you're all good. Yeah, lots of discussion about exactly what you're saying about how brilliant young kids are good at making us do the right thing. And also there's a bit of chatter about the defensive driving training, and in New South Wales, L platers get an extra 20 hours to their total of 120 hours if they do one of these courses. So it does seem to be promoted there a lot by you know, the insurance companies and so on. So that's interesting. That it is very promoted. They're also in New South Wales, L platers are limited to lower speeds.
Yes.
Which some people don't agree with. They should be driving at posted speeds to get the required experience at high speeds before they get in a car and can drive faster by themselves when they have someone to give them some guidance. Point-to-point speed cameras is different in each state or territory. I know Victoria, we have tons of them. It's terrific. It might be just for heavy vehicles in New South Wales.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's about it for the moment. Sorry,
that's all good. Lots of good chat. I might just get through these next 10 minutes because got quite a few slides to go. But just on this topic of enforcements, rather than just always fining and, you know, imprisoning in some cases, more elegant solutions by like addressing, well, what's the actual risk? You know, if it's drink driving, then fitting these interlock devices. So targeting that specific risk. Because if you take away that vehicle and you impound that vehicle from that person, give them a massive fine, there's a pretty high likelihood that that person's life will spiral out of control because they're no longer got access to, you know, primary access to work, got to pick up the kids, groceries, etc. Providing this as a means to target that risk and mitigate that is a much better outcome. You can similarly do things with speed. You know, you can give people a specific key, and when they put that in the car, well, then you're speed limited to whatever it is set at. So you can't drive over X kilometers per hour. And that technology has been there for a long time. This is a photo of Ken. I recognize that by Ken's watch. He still wears that watch. This is taken about 15 years ago, but that is the software there telling him that he's in a 100 kilometer per hour speed zone. And it also, you know, bips and flashes at him if he's going too fast. So we've had this technology for ages. It's just, it is interesting that, yeah, we're not more invested in really pushing that on perpetrators who are regularly exceeding speed limits and actually, you know, providing these restrictions on them so they are unable to travel at higher speeds. Not going to go through these key points. I'll let you read those in your own time, but just a variety of things that we've been through. Instead, we'll hop into our safer vehicle space, and as part of the ANCAP safety tests, they are required to do a variety of different crash types, one being head-on, one being side impact. To get a 5-star rating with a side impact crash like this, the speed that the vehicle is traveling is at 32 kilometers per hour. So I'm sure you could imagine crashes are occurring much faster than that on our network, but that is what is required to get a 5-star, as long as the dummy there doesn't receive greater than a severity 3 brain injury, then you've got 5 stars. Pedestrian crashes, lots of modern vehicles now have this feature at the bonnet there where it kind of pops down and then pops back up, so it provides a little bit of extra cushioning there, and some even have airbags that deploy to help protect the pedestrian's head. When we do get into this automated space, so you can see there's no steering wheel there whatsoever. As I said before, this is really, it's seen as quite futuristic. It's certainly going to occur, but once again, it's going to be a long time before we actually see the turnover of the fleet before the majority of vehicles look like this. So we've still got a long time, and we still need to be investing in safe system infrastructure treatments to be able to improve the level of safety rather than just sit and wait for this day to occur. So it's a valid question though. I'm going to skip through that one. Don't really need that one. Safer speeds. We need to acknowledge just how important the speed relationship is to crashes. So in this particular example, we've got travel speed on the y-axis and how long it takes on the x. And we'll just have a look at this one at 50 kilometers per hour. If there was a hazard, or let's just say a person, 45 meters away, well, they've managed to stop at the 35 meter mark, so they'll be okay. Going 20 kilometers faster, 70 kilometers, they've hit the pedestrian at 46 kilometers per hour. So it's not a linear relationship between speed and your stopping distance. It's not linear. And also, by that same token, it's not a linear relationship by the change in speed and the change in the level of severity. This gets quite mathematical, so I wouldn't worry too much about the fourth power and the third power relative to speed. What this graph is telling you, and this is widely replicated, is small changes to the speed, to the operating speed or the speed of collision, just small changes can have big changes to the level of trauma expected. So if you're changing from 5 kilometers, just wipe off 5, that previous campaign, dropping in 5 kilometers per hour speed limit can have massive implications for the probability of a fatal or a serious injury occurring. So that's why we're trying to advocate lower speeds, so frequently.
Sorry, Max, what's the reaction time? Oh, we're getting some specifics here. Previous slide, please. What is the... Oh, yes, this one. Thank you.
Yep.
Which is the reaction timer for this table? 1.5, 2, or 2.5? From
memory, it's 2.5, but okay. I will just follow that up with the below. That's taken from the TMR document. So yeah, we can share that, or you can just click on the link there, and that will take you to that one.
Terrific, thank you.
And it's a regular passenger vehicle as well.
Terrific.
Discussing speeds, need to think about the community. So lowering the current speed limits. This was a survey that went out years ago now, but still relevant. This was in Tasmania, but we found similar sentiments across jurisdictions. So lowering the current speed limits would reduce the crashes on roads. It's pretty split. So green being, I believe it's true. That is only, I hope I got my maths right, 39% believe that that's true. So you can see not a lot of the community actually believe that. Females are doing better than males, which is no surprises. They're always much more switched on. But if you rephrase that and you say lowering the speed limits would reduce the severity, well, that's when you actually get better outcomes. So you can see there's a bit more understanding about that one there. This is an interesting figure to say. Another way of looking at the SAFE system is, okay, at the bottom here, if we say this is how much the human can tolerate before we're going to experience serious injury or death, we then feed that into our road environment, our road user, and our vehicle. So those are what's fed in. Then at the end, if we apply a certain speed, we will have a safe road transport network. Really good example of this in practice is a racetrack. We permit very, very high speeds on racetracks, don't we? But there's no intersections. There's large clear zones. There's lots of barriers. There's, ambulance staff on site ready to attend any scene that may occur. The actual occupants of the vehicles, they're certainly very aware. They're certainly very compliant and alert. And they've also got their own PPE on. They wear a helmet, they wear fire protection suits and things like that. So it's not all about setting lower speed zones across the network. It's about ensuring that the surrounding environment matches the speed. I'm tempted here to either pause, Kathy, and let you show LMS, or I just punch through the rest? What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. What are you punching through?
I'll go through the rest then. I'll go through.
All right. Yeah.
Here we
you
go.
can go.
So, safe speeds generally understood in high pedestrian areas, but it's more than just a sign, and it's more than just a red circle. You've got to be supporting that with different infrastructure. So local area traffic management treatments to be able to support that. Strip shopping, variable speed limit signs. We're super keen on these in Victoria. We have these regularly throughout our network. Basically shifting during peak times to a lower speed, and when there's not people visiting cafes and going to bars and stuff like that, speed goes up. Won't go into that one there. Our risk formula is regularly, as we've seen across different areas, you know, whether you're in health or economics or statistics, whatever you're in, it's defined as likelihood times consequence. Within safe system though, we actually expand our likelihood to include exposure. So we've kind of just brought this extra variable. And exposure is all about the number of road users there. So if we're talking about a head-on crash, we'd be looking at, well, how many vehicles are in that space? That would be our exposure. So how do we make our system safer? Well, if you were looking to reduce exposure, you'd be looking to reduce the number of road users. So it's a little bit difficult to see in here, but in this photo here, they've reduced the conflict, which is this railway crossing, by just closing off the road. So they've just said, well, vehicles can't get through there. We've reduced that exposure because the road users are no longer crossing where that conflict is. Another way to reduce exposure is through separated bike paths. If you've got all your heavy vehicles, general traffic traveling up there, and a separate path for cyclists to travel, so they don't have to interact with general traffic, then you have impacted your exposure because you haven't got that conflict between those two road users anymore. There's still a risk between cyclists colliding with cyclists or other pedestrians, but you know, the more serious trauma is obviously being removed. Things that we look at where we can impact on the likelihood, these are much more common within our road safety treatments, which is, you know, wide center lines or fully controlling a right turn. So any of those typical road safety treatments, you know, even things like barriers and stuff like that. Our severity is largely to do with the speeds that we are trying to do. So we're trying to bring down speeds. The most common way to do that, other than a speed reduction, is through raised platforms, raised safety platforms, or speed tables, sometimes they're called, safety ramps. If you are reducing speeds, you're reducing severity. So we've got these three kind of different risk factors: exposure, likelihood, severity, and that will become more important as we head through these modules. Final one, and then it's the last slide there, Kathy, is reducing severity as well, is through the use of barriers. They are much more forgiving than running off road, colliding with a tree. They're obviously designed to be a forgiving system. And that's it. I did it. End of module 1. Time to spare.
Well done. Well done. Great job. Thank you very much, Max. And I'm just sharing my screen here at the moment, which is, this is the learning management system. You're in the Safe System Assessment October course. I want to alert you to all the wonderful resources. There are tons of them in here, but something that we covered off in today's session was what doesn't work for young road users and why. And this is an excellent, nice, easy fact sheet about things that work and things that don't work that Max touched on. So you can have a look at that for more information. The other thing I want to alert you to, because we're right on time and I'm very sorry. So there's the presentation slides. There's some of the videos that we showed in today's session. Here's the quiz, short 10 question multiple choice quiz if you can get that done in the next couple of days. And there's that Mythbusters episode as well. This is where we'll put the recording of the webinar, usually a couple hours. So by this afternoon, it'll be up there, and we are all ready to go for Thursday at 10:30. Max, thank you so much for doing today's session. That was terrific. And I do want to end with one more thing. There was a comment earlier that said, in terms of P-platers, boys will be boys, adult brain doesn't cut in until 26. And a follow-up comment saying, welcome the forgiving system.
Fabulous. That's a very good motto.
Thanks
everyone. Thanks for
everyone.
the chat.
See you next time.
Fabulous. Bye.